Hello, everyone. Welcome to Governance Security Policy's FCL closing ceremony. We're here today to celebrate the feature changelog process and that we finished with the work for this one. And we already prepared pre-recorded session with the general update about FCL and why it happened and what we did during this phase. And today it's all about celebrating and all about talking about possible outcomes for the future and what kind of plans do we have and answering questions. So yeah, I see, Wayne, you have first item.
So great job, Ellen, by you and the team on your first FCL. Some of it's obvious, like the process and the why, and some of it is not. So the second one, hopefully the second one won't be for a while, but usually the, second and subsequent ones are a little bit easier.
Yeah, and thank you for your help during identifying the need for the process and so on. So yeah, thank you for this. Okay, so when you have, yeah, go ahead.
So I reviewed the FCL. I reviewed it over time, but I reviewed it again today. Many issues in the work plan are closed, and many MRs are merged, which is great, but not all. When it's not expected that all would be. But my question is, for the items still open, which give us a high risk of a repeated incident, should we hold the FCL open to complete that subset? In particular, the one that jumped out at me, but you and Dominic know the details better than I do. I'm just reading from the RCA, as the issue was not reproducible in staging environment, we might look for ways to increase traffic in staging to be able to properly evaluate how the given change affects the environment. That's from the RCA. From reading the FCL, it sounds like we started some spike work to investigate this, but haven't completed it as part of the FCL.
So yeah, like from the items you've mentioned, like we have some suggestions that we will leave open because they will require some discussion with other people in GitLab. So that's first thing. We're waiting for the feedback for this one. So the good thing about the whole thing, about the whole like process and the incident is that the feature was introduced behind feature flag, so that process worked. And the main cause of it, so like change in the code that caused this incident was reverted. First of all, it was like disabled by feature flag, then it was reverted, and we'll not do any improvements in terms of like scan result policies until we have this epic finished in terms of like tracking improvements for approvals. So that's all. The second thing. The third thing, on staging, we started creating manually project, like group with the project NMR to get more and more data, but it will require some work with like security quality team. So that's why we created the spike, and after the spike, we created implementation issue, and we're tracking things with them. And if we will be able to help, we'd love to help, but this will require some work with people on the like engineers and testing. So that's the biggest biggest three. And the last item, but in my opinion, like from my perspective, the most important one is the main root cause for this problem is not paying attention to dashboards after enabling feature flag and not keeping the proper distance between like enabling this feature flag for next portion of actors. So we did two improvements during the process. So first of all, when in the feature template, feature flag rollout template, we've added the step that you should actually verify this. And then in the documentation, we added a section that explains what to look for and so on. And one on the dashboards and what kind of dashboards to look for, what kind of data to look for, and so on. During this RCA and talking with SREs and other engineers, and also there is one feedback on the ChatOps suggestion, that we do not have like a good materials for engineers, especially for someone that just joined GitLab, about like having a training in Level Up or any other place to help them familiarize with dashboards and to know what kind of metrics to look for and so on. So we were learning that during this process and also before, but it would be great to have this kind of training. I wanted actually to ask you about this. Is this something that we should talk about with learning and development team, or something that we should initiate? Like, I'm not sure about the process for like requesting something like that.
It's a great question. I don't know.
Okay, so I'll follow up on that. Okay.
I also had some, really appreciate all the analysis on this, and it sounds good to me. Some low priority, but I've made the low priority feedback, FCL. So, oh, sorry, read only. So my last thing I added while we were talking, has the engineering allocation meeting been updated to show that we're closing the FCL?
I'll update it after this meeting. I wanted just to make sure that we have recording. I have all the links, so I'll do that.
Great. And I have the, I always like providing the links to easily find things, so I'll add that to the notes here too. And that will be the last stuff. Dominic, any thoughts or feedback?
I think the most important part will be to enable staging to alert us for performance regressions. But this takes a lot of work. There's an epic to track this. And also there's a separate issue that quality is tracking for automatically seeding the staging database. And I think this is the most promising way forward. Like currently, I was also looking into ways, because alerts, we have two options. Either we increase the staging and the traffic and staging so that the production alerts would work. This would mean we create a very large number of these repositories, or we change the production rules so that alerting works in staging. So as far as I can tell from this epic, they choose the second option to update the production rules. And I think until then, the only option is that we roll like a custom homebrew metric alerter. But then you also run into questions like, where do you actually deploy this thing? Then you have one single piece of one service, which is bespoke, and which maybe runs in some CI pipeline or so scheduled, but still it's kind of wonky for this specific thing to hand roll a metrics reporter. So I would also suggest to wait until this is sorted out and staging alerting works as desired.
Thank you, Dominic. Will you update the document with the links to Epic and like to those two epics?
Yeah, sure, I can.
All right. So that would be it. Thank you for your questions. The last item is like we should do the retrospective. Like I'll ask you probably, like I've mentioned something in the. Let me share my screen quickly. So I've mentioned two items. What went well and what was great. The most important thing is that most of the features, actually all features that were related to enabling anything in standards and policies were implemented behind feature flags. So we were aware that at some point our experiments will end up in something that we'll need to revert quickly. So we followed the process to actually be able to disable it quickly. So that's great thing that we did that. We were able to revert the change within like a few minutes after identifying the issue. And the whole like process in terms of like the communication with support, with SRE team and many people that were involved in this was great. Like it was really quick and great like experience for us. The other thing is that we started learning more about metrics, not only dashboards, but also like other more specific metrics that we can actually track particular worker or particular class that is not working properly, and we would like to continue doing that. We'll monitor those as we'll implement new improvements. So this is really important. So yeah, like Dominic would like to add anything, like anything that you've learned during this process?
Yeah, I added. I'm sorry, Don. I added. Well,
no, go ahead.
The team learned the FCL process quickly, as this was the team's first one. Sorry, Dominic, you were saying?
I also learned something about Sidekick in the process, because I was wondering if we cannot contain the blast radius of this worker in the future. Because what happened was this one worker suffered performance regression, and as a consequence, the whole application stack suffered. Like nodes, merge requests, and everything were impacted. And I looked into how the GitLab Sidekick setup looks like, and you have these workers, the number of workers, and these if metadata. And then you have a number of routing rules, and these routing rules map the workers onto a number of shards. In total, we have currently, I think, 8 or 9. And you can think of these Sidekick shards as the unit of isolation. So whenever one of these workers in the shard gets impacted, the whole shard suffers potentially as a consequence. So I was wondering and asking if we cannot like move it to a separate shard, because ideally if you have one worker, one shard, then the workers are actually isolated. Reason why this is not configured this way is for performance reason. So actually, the way that Sidekick is set up, it contains a trade-off where reliability is traded to performance to some degree. Now, there's also a quarantine shard, which was configured 1 year ago, and there are 2 workers currently in the shard. And apparently there was also a problem for this, and I was asking if we cannot move our worker also to this quarantine shard, because it's still better if these 2 workers get impacted than the whole application stack than it currently is. And the response I got was then that if you have 3 workers that are potentially like vulnerable, why would you put them in a shard? So I'm not super convinced that this is the best argument, because the consequences are still better than when you cannot access nodes, merge requests and everything, right? So I was thinking maybe I just open a draft in there or just assign it to the reliability guys and see what they say, because it seems like a worthwhile trade-off for me. I mean, this one worker falls over, which is really only limited in functionality to security policies. And then you cannot access your nodes, or your merge requests no longer load. So I think also if we could find a way to isolate Sidekick workers beyond one shard, one worker, that would also be great. But I'm also not deeply enough into the Sidekick thing and how they configured it here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah, so we definitely learned a lot about like things related to performance, reliability, and like we improved our like relationship with those teams, and hopefully we'll work more with quality team in the future. So we'll like work on some improvements. So the most like what was really important for us is to being able to stop for a minute, identify the problems like performance issues with this control policies itself, and improve it. The good thing that the timing for it was great, because we actually like starting the FCL right after Threat Insights Group team like finished working on like moving like all security findings for all branches to database. So they just finished and they like turn on the feature flag by default, and now we can use that data. So it will help us with moving the whole thing to database. So the main problem currently is that we're not using database. We're using like reading blobs, and those blobs are stored in the storage. So you need to like network traffic to get those, then some time to parse them, and so on and so on. So now we're gonna just reduce the time used for parsing this data, and we're gonna just work immediately on the data in database. So this will help us as well. All right. So thank you for your work, Dominique. Sashi is not here, but yeah, let's thank him as well. That was great. Seeing us collaborating on those things and being involved in the process. So that was amazing work. So now we can get back to normal and make sure that we will deliver those improvements in the future. Again, thank you, Wayne, for your help, and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.